Hey Brendon, happy Thursday. I really enjoyed your video on the cinema viewing experience. Today I'm going to talk about something way serious though. I'm going to discuss the Syrian refugee crisis and what the United States ought to do about it. Today we're going to talk about the refugee process. We're also going to discuss why it's in our best interest as a nation to accept them. And lastly, Brendon, we're going to discuss some of the practical solutions we can do as a nation, as individuals, to solve this problem. So Brendon, in a very simplified way, the refugee process goes something like this. You arrive in the host country, you sign up for a United Nations refugee program, and then you sign up through another program in the United States that requires dealing with multiple government agencies. Now, that can be really challenging, especially with somebody who might not speak our language. And lastly, Brendon, placement happens. And placement can happen into any sort of individual city. In the United States, there's about 18 areas where refugees can be placed, and they're typically placed in areas where there is enough housing and food and language resources, work, etc., that they won't be completely destitute and desperate when they arrive. And while this process is good, Brendon, I want to stress that it is not good enough because it can take anywhere from 1 year to 5 years before the refugee is placed. All of that time they're living on the margins. That process takes about 18 months on average, which means Syrians that signed up a few months ago won't be able to be in the United States until 2017. Now from this process, Brendon, we get two kinds of refugees. We get accepted refugees. Accepted refugees are economically stable from the country they're in. They're loosely kept attractive, but they're organized. In general, Brendon, these refugees tend to be very grateful for what the country is doing for them. And a significant portion of the time they're working and contributing back to the society that's helping them. Now, Brendon, there's another kind of refugee. These refugees are destitute. The government doesn't track them. They're desperate and disorganized. They're unsafe and they often feel like shameful victims. Lastly, Brendon, if they are working, they're not usually contributing to the tax system. Now, Brendon, of these two groups, who do you think is more likely to become a terrorist? See, Brendon, the problem with terrorists isn't that they're irrational, it's that they are too rational. ISIS has shown itself to be well organized and to deliver well-executed raids. So, Brendon, I have to ask, why would they send a terrorist through a refugee organization that would take several years to get through? An organization that's going to vet them, an organization that's going to study them and spend time with them. When they come out through the other end of it, they're still not going to have a lot of resources to accomplish anything. Why would ISIS wait several years? Brendon, it's easier to take a rowboat full of explosives, row across the Atlantic Ocean and bomb a harbor than it is to send a terrorist through a refugee program. Now, I want to be clear here, Brendon. I'm not saying it's impossible that the terrorists would send somebody through a refugee program. I'm just saying that it's not very likely. In the case of the Paris attacks, all of them were carried out by European citizens. There was a report afterwards that they found a Syrian passport on one of the bodies. It turns out that that passport was faked by ISIS. And this is what I mean by they're too rational. They know what our fears are and they're exploiting them. If we reject the refugees because we are afraid that they will become terrorists, we are playing right into ISIS's hands. You see, Brendon, it's an advantage for them if things are chaotic, if we don't know what to do, and if we reject those refugees. But Brendon, there are other reasons why this is in the best interest of our country. Our allies are getting just creamed with all these different refugees. Greece, Slovenia, Austria. These countries are too small, GDP, economically wise, however you want to measure it. If we suddenly had 100 million people come into our country, we could not handle the economic disturbance that would occur. For the United States, this is relatively easy. We have so many more people and such a bigger economy than most other European countries. Also, Brendon, it is a principle of our nation to take in the tired, the poor, the sick. Just look at the Statue of Liberty. Helping the refugees is the safest course of action. When we help the refugees, they're well vetted, they're well organized, they're grateful, and they're working and contributing to us. And it'll be great diplomacy for us. Countries will be thankful that we'll be taking on so many different refugees. Brendon, I said I'd have some practical solutions for you, so let's get started on those. First of all, we have to work on persuading social conservatives. Social conservatives in general are not for letting these refugees into the United States. The way to convince conservatives is that it is very good for our economy. Not only will we get Syria's top talent coming over to help us out, doctors, engineers, attorneys, all of these people will be able to move to the United States and get a job and help us out in the areas that we need it most. We also have to assuage security fears. I understand that there's a lot of people worried that bringing these refugees in is going to cause a lot of problems in the United States. It would be false of us to pretend that no crimes will ever be committed by refugees. It would be false of us to pretend that no bad things will ever happen. However, refugees are disproportionately good citizens because they have a lot more to lose if things go wrong for them. And as I explained earlier in the video, Brendon, accepted refugees are the safest course of action for the United States. Secondly, Brendon, I want to tell you something practical we can all do. Now, this is a subject that makes me a little irritated. I've seen over the last few days along Facebook and in conversations with others that conservatives are being derided as cowards, hypocrites, ignorant, and all sorts of terrible words. And this is a huge problem. See, when you insult someone, you cut them off from being persuaded to fix the problem. What you're doing is making it harder, not easier. It's important to keep the refugees in focus here and realize that we have to persuade the people we live alongside. When you blatantly insult others, you make it harder to persuade them. You make yourself feel better, and you make the base feel better. But you are hurting the refugees. Knock it off. Here are some practical things our government can do. The United States government must allow American citizens to let Syrians into their homes. There's a couple advantages to this. My favorite advantage to this is the best vetting process that we can provide. When they live in Americans' homes, that relationship is a vetting process. Another thing our government needs to do is expand and expedite the refugee process. Right now it is too slow and too small to do much good. The problem with President Obama's plan to bring in 10,000 Syrians isn't that it is too much, it's that it is not nearly enough. Two other suggestions I have are related. One, I was talking to a friend and he gave me this excellent idea. There are collapsing economies all over the United States in towns. If we bring these refugees into these towns where there are houses available and for sale, particularly refugees who have training in various areas, these refugees can provide the country doctors, country attorneys, mechanics that small towns all over the United States are losing. In addition to this, Brendon, the recession caused many economically disadvantaged European countries. Why don't we offer some amount of money to these countries and allow them to help the refugees, take a fee for helping the refugees in order to get their economy back on track? This is a win-win situation for everybody. In particular, I'm thinking of Greece. In no way should the United States bully these other countries into this. We can donate, we can of course persuade social conservatives who are against this, and we can also stop being so vitriolic. That's what an individual can do. On a larger scale, our government can do all sorts of different things. What I want to stress here, Brendon, is that we don't have to do all of these things. We don't have to do all of these things to the max. We can do a combination of these things, some of these things, because doing something is far better than doing nothing. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Get this video out there. Get other people involved. Persuade other people. For all you Gin and Owls lovers, next week there will be no video as it is Thanksgiving. Be thankful. Enjoy your Thanksgiving. Brendon, you need a story still. 1, it has to be your cereal. 2, introduce a villain. 3, write 3 pages. Gin and Owls out.